Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I just saw a tweet from Connor Stalions 22 hours ago, and he just says, "We are so back." And Tony, I could not agree more. We, Tony, are so back doing the thing that the audience loves, maybe the most of all, talking about the Michigan sign stealing scandal and the latest, somewhat significant developments in that story.
Yeah, significant developments. And first, I would just like to thank Michigan for waiting until after the season, until after Ohio State's season, to release some of these things to Yahoo and which we're talking about right now. Ross Dellenger has a report out there, got some leaked documents from Michigan's response to the NCAA, and a 137-page response, of which only a portion was given to Yahoo. And Tom, to clarify, Yahoo and Ross, they don't say where this came from, who gave them the leaked documents. But do you want to take a guess? Maybe?
Okay, so here's how you figure this out. We'll do a little bit of inside baseball or Kremlinology, however you want to do it. There's a line in here that tells me, they don't tell me who gave them the documents, but there's a line in here that tells me who gave them the documents. The line is the top of the third paragraph. In the 137-page document, a portion of which Yahoo Sports obtained. That's all you need. That's all you need, because then you look at what else is in there, and it's like, here's all the reasons the NCAA is wrong. Tony, here, I don't want to outsource it. We don't want to do that journalistically. So I will just say it could be someone from the Michigan football program. Okay. It could be someone associated with the Wolverines. It could be someone who lives in Ann Arbor. It could be someone who works in Ann Arbor. I think that's it. I think those are the only four possibilities. But I feel pretty strongly it's at least one and possibly up to four of those four things.
That's pretty interesting. If it was all four, there's a pretty good possibility that it's actually been released, leaked by someone in the Michigan football program. I don't know. That's neither here nor there, but it's kind of not. It's kind of when you consider that it sure looks like this is coming from Michigan. And so this is all put out with a Michigan bent to it, and we'll go through it. This does not all look great for Michigan. So there's some things here where it's like, even when you're trying to put out the best stuff, it's like still not great. Like bands who have like 3 songs, but they put out a 12-song greatest hits album. You're like, I don't know that we needed to go to 12 songs. We probably should have just done an EP and gotten a 3, or just release some singles, because boy, there are not 9 other hits in this thing here, Tom.
No. The Michigan leaker, if it was someone from Michigan, maybe it was someone from somewhere north of Columbus, west of Canada. I don't know. I mean, it could be literally anyone. Maybe they should have gotten to the work and overtime part. Is what I think I'm saying. Here's a super chat from TK who says the staffer that started the investigation must have leaked the document to that guy. So. Funny thing that maybe that's where we'll start here. There is a let me just find it. According to the document, the tipster who tipped off the NCAA to this, the tipster derived from Michigan's own campus. The unnamed source, which the NCAA has not disclosed, appeared to have worked at the school at least at one point. Tony, did you know that Ryan Day's brother worked at Michigan? Crazy. How did we not know that? That's wild. Because Tony, the only other explanation is that the single stupidest possible explanation and the single stupidest thing for people to have been focused on this whole time to try and distract from, the other stuff that we were talking about was all nonsense the whole time. Tony, fetch me my fainting couch. I shan't believe it, Tony. I simply shan't.
Tom, maybe you should just step away then, because I don't want you to partake anymore in this and have your feelings and all of your dreams dashed about the innocence here. But the whole New Hampshire PI thing, that like credentialed media on the Michigan side were putting out there, and some were spouting it, some were alluding to it, and everybody putting this on Ohio State. And I've even still seen on a Michigan message board like, well, this just means that the PI basically trapped the Michigan staffer into, like, after hacking, they found this guy and like, hey, we've got this stuff on you. What are you going to do about it? And they're like, yeah, I better just go to the NCAA. You've got me. You've got me. And so it's still Ohio State's doing that. It came from Michigan's own campus. And again, still wrongdoing. And so then let's continue there, Tom. We're probably just going to run through this entire thing and not necessarily nitpick it, but just talk about it. The first one is the second paragraph that I want to talk about, and its response to the NCAA sent earlier this month. Michigan refutes many of the alleged rules violations and accuses the NCAA of grossly overreaching and wildly overcharging the program without credible evidence that other staff members knew of Stalions' illegal in-person scouting system. And then later on, it mentions like 4 assistant coaches who knew of it. And in the response. So, like, now what Michigan is also saying in some of that is like, well, they knew of the legal part, but not the illegal part. And so there's a lot of semantics, and much of maybe the entire thing is in this is like, you haven't proven everything. And so that means you really haven't proven much. And you're overstepping your accusations because a lot of this isn't proven. And then there are portions here we'll probably get to where Michigan's like, you have not presented any evidence, in which Yahoo's like, the NCAA presented the evidence. It's like, this is some pretty interesting and crazy, wild stuff, Tom.
Yeah. Do you remember in the movie A Few Good Men? That's the one with like Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson. You want me on that wall? Yeah. There's a line, one of the also famous, but less famous than the whole "you want me on that wall" speech, is I think it was Demi Moore stands up and says, I strenuously object. And it's like, oh, you strenuously object. Oh, well, then that's a very different thing. Tony, they're not just overreaching. They're grossly overreaching. Tony, they're not overcharging. They're wildly overcharging. That's, hey, listen, let those who have not been wildly overcharged by a lawyer before stand. Am I right? Am I right? So, yeah, so there you go. You got to give a little credibility there. But billable hours aside, boy, grossly overreaching and wildly overcharging. This is just, again, the second paragraph. But, it's if you have the facts on your side, you have the law on your side, pound the law. If you have the facts on your side, pound the facts. If you have neither, say that they're grossly overreaching and wildly overcharging. I feel like that's kind of how that saying goes. There's a lot in here. And as you said, there's a lot in here that's like, this sort of contradicts something you said like 6 paragraphs earlier, which is very interesting in something that is coming, as we said, from the Michigan side. This is very much the Michigan perspective of things. And if you want, I'm sure there are Michigan folks who are reading this and going, see, everything is exactly as we said. And, Michigan it feels like there's a little bit of the Shaggy defense in here where it's just, it wasn't me. And it's just kind of like, let's see what you can prove. And, that's now where what the NCAA is being charged with. Like, okay, what can you prove? The challenge for Michigan is, what can the NCAA prove? But the NCAA is also going to be the judge in this case, and is going to be, laying down the sentence. I will go way out on a limb and guess that when the NCAA does impose a sentence, Michigan is going to appeal and say that they were wildly overcharged and unfairly punished. And this is probably a situation that's going to drag on longer than just about everyone wants. And then by the time there is a resolution, the argument is going to be, Tony, this was years ago. You can't possibly punish these poor children who are here now for something that happened so many years ago. I mean, go ahead and mark this time code down and marvel as I successfully predict the future, 6 to 12 to 18 months from now.
Well, as long as you keep kicking the can down the road, eventually you might kick it to where there is no NCAA. So there could be no NCAA punishments. So why not just keep putting stuff off and waiting for change to come? The third paragraph, the next paragraph, there's there's a point down there. The school purports that the sign stealing system offered minimal relevance to competition, was not credibly proven by NCAA investigators, and should be treated as a minor violation. This keep going back to, it was minor relevance to competition. Well, at least they finally admitted there's relevance, but also like if it didn't matter, why do it? That's the one we'll always go back to. Was not credibly proven by NCAA investigators. Credible being Michigan's word, proven being a word on in and of itself. Like, yeah, you proved it, but not credibly. Like, we disagree with the proof there of the video evidence and the text messages and the spreadsheets and things like that they have. So like Michigan may not think it's credible, but again, if the NCAA does, that's kind of all that matters. And yes, there will be a major appeal here. You've got a bunch of stuff listed that you want to talk about. There was just too much stuff for me to list. I figured we would just go through this, but I'll hand it over to you. Like, what is the next thing that you want to address that we can discuss?
Well, I wanted to talk first about the idea that this was minimal relevance to competition. You look at their records, the 3 years that of the Stallions era, which is 2021, 2022, and 2023. Michigan's record in those 3 seasons was 40-3. In the 3 years before that, and this is not, arbitrary data points. This is because the year before that they were 8-5. So I'm not like cherry picking, but the 3 years before those 3 years where they went 40-3, they went 21-11. And then in the year after, they went 8-5. So they went 29-16 in the years directly surrounding the years when they went 40-3. Okay, listen, maybe they just had an easier schedule those years. Okay, so Tony, I asked you to pull up the data earlier on their record against the point spread to see if there might be some kind of hidden benefit that might have been provided that, even the most savvy observers of the sport might be able to, might not be able to detect. In 2018 to 2020, they were 14-18 against the spread. This year, they were 6-7 against the spread. So that's 20-25 against the spread. So that's, not great, but within the margin of error. In 2021 to 2023, they were 26-14-3. So if, hang on, let me pull up, let me run some quick calculations here. So that would be 27.5 divided by 43, 64% winning percentage against the spread. If you hit 54% against the spread as a bettor, you're like, that's like, you can sell your picks to people. So to go 64% in a 3-year span, where literally all you had to do was bet on what is essentially a public team, that feels like that's like there was probably some hidden something there that was not able to be accounted for in the numbers of the folks from Las Vegas. So that one might be even to me even more consequential than the really obvious, like, duh, this was the best 3-year span in the last, I don't know, 40 years at least of Michigan history by like the widest of margins, and is surrounded by years that don't have any resemblance to those 3 years. Like, it feels like, I don't know that that's going to be a winning legal argument. Like, this didn't really help us. You can't prove it. Well, okay, you have numbers and facts on your side, but you can't like prove it, right?
But Tom, I will remind you, this is the first time those 3 years where they had seniors and talent. So and so just remember that there was talent and seniors, and they never had that before ever at Michigan. The super chat from Jordan Kapler here, 137 pages to say nuh-uh and yeah, but so what? And that's very, very accurate. And that's kind of what leads me to the next thing that I wanted to talk about, which is maybe a couple of paragraphs later. But in its response, Michigan believes that the notice of allegations sent to the school in August makes, quote, numerous factually unsupported infractions, exaggerates aggravating factors, and ignores mitigating facts. The document says the school requests that the NCAA apply common sense and commitment to fairness and treat the case not as a serious level 1 infraction case, but a level 2 standard case. And as I tweeted a little bit ago, it's pretty interesting that right now Michigan is searching for and calling for a commitment to fairness during an investigation of a cheating scandal. The idea that the numerous factually unsupported infractions and the exaggerated aggravating factors and ignoring the mitigating facts, like sure we cheated, but you're ignoring why. You're not taking into account why we did this. Like, you're not even going to listen to our side of the story of why we've done all of this, which is pretty funny. But the aggravating factors and the numerous factually unsupported infractions, that's where it's later on. Then the NCAA is like, the piece of this is like the NCAA provided video evidence, photo evidence, and all of those things. And like I also tweeted out, it's very much like the Rick James meme from the Chappelle show. It was like, I didn't grind my boots on Eddie Murphy's couch, and then 1 second later, it's like, yeah, I remember grinding my boots on Eddie Murphy's couch. Like, this is what this is in so many ways. 6 of the 11 allegations against the school are deemed as level 1. That is certainly concerning to Michigan, of which they say those 6 are without merit or credible evidence. And again, it gets back to the credible thing. Like, well, if we don't believe it, then it's not credible.
Yeah. And, coming out and leaking this stuff is a great way to get the NCAA to say, what did the 5 fingers say to the face? I mean, that's something that has historically not played out great for schools that have done this and programs that have done this kind of thing. But yeah, it's 6 level 1 allegations that's enormous, a huge number of level 1 allegations. And I think the important piece of this in terms of what a punishment could look like, and we're not at the point where you're going to ask us, what do you think is going to happen? And we're going to say, I don't know. You have to let the process play out, because it's very easy to go, oh, they're going to get a 3-year bowl ban, or they're going to lose 30 scholarships, or they're like, you can throw stuff out, or you can just say they're going to get hammered. And it's like, what does that mean? It's like, oh, no, they're going to get whatever it is. I'm going to be right. That's like, there are people who will do that. You know who those people are. We're not going to be those people. But one thing that is extremely relevant here is that Michigan has they are currently on probation for a whole separate role, group of NCAA of violations, level 1 violations. And so now they're in line to be a repeat offender. Why is that? Why is that relevant? Well, number one, first of all, this version of, the version of this leak that you're getting right now for this case, that was the leak that was cheeseburgers, etc. It was just, they bought some kids some cheeseburgers. Tony, we all have to eat. The Rally's commercial says you got to eat. What are you going to do? Not eat? Like, Tony, then they would die. Do you want us to kill these children? Like, that was the leak back then. And then it was like, well, okay, so it turns out, like, yes, technically they were doing a bunch of COVID visits, but like cheeseburgers, Tony, let's talk about the cheeseburgers. That was how that got leaked. And it was like, are you mad that we bought a child a cheeseburger to allow him to live one more day? And that turned into multiple major NCAA infractions and set them up now for this. And the reason that that's relevant here is, if you're a repeat violator, you're in line for more significant penalties than you would be if this was just your first case. And that's why Michigan's pushing back so hard on the Sharon Moore and the Jim Harbaugh piece here, and why they're saying there's no merit or credible evidence, because those guys were found, those guys were kind of cited and named in that initial case. So now those guys in particular are repeat violators in addition to the school. So all of that is kind of relevant here to why they're fighting back on this certain stuff.
And they're also fighting back on the idea that the school is a repeat violator,
right?
Which confuses me, because you're already on probation for something, and then the allegations here are not just sign stealing. There are also recruiting infractions that are serious in their own right as a repeat violator. So, like, there are multiple violations, but please, we're not repeat violators. And it's like, well, yeah, I don't know how you're not, but again, this is going to be painted. Michigan is trying to put the best face on this, and And it's like, you know what? Let's just shoot for the moon. We're also not repeat violators. We just want to throw that in there. And sure, we did some of this, and some of these are violations. But repeat, that's an ugly word. Let's not use that word. Let's not use the R word when we're talking about NCAA infractions and punishments.
I don't think that's our word. It is a, I mean, I want to read from this, I'm going to show my work on this. This is from the Dellenger thing. 2 years ago, a separate investigation found both Harbaugh and Moore guilty of COVID-era recruiting violations. In that case, Michigan was placed on 3 years probation, and Harbaugh received a 4-year show cause order that effectively prevents him from coaching in college. So again, I control F to cheeseburgers and nothing came up, curiously enough. But for COVID-era recruiting violations, Sherrone Moore was already found guilty, and James Harbaugh was already found guilty. So then, when they're in this case, those two guys are potentially in deeper water than than they would be otherwise, and the program is as well. Now Harbaugh is safely coaching in Los Angeles with the Chargers and is outside of the NCAA's reach. Sherrone Moore is not, so that's going to be potentially, he's someone who has a good bit on the line here, both personally and professionally.
He does, and we'll see if he can not be suspended this year. It would be a first for a Michigan coach to go like, hey, an entire year, 2 years in a row. One of the paragraphs here, Tom, and I'm not sure how many bylaws you've got ready or any, but
none. Disappointingly none. I did not pull up bylaws for this one because we're not at the point where we're comparing specific things to specific rules. Like that'll be like the next show probably. That's not this show.
I just wonder how accurate this is, because here's another paragraph. While the school respects the secrecy of confidential sources, it says in the document, the NCAA can present evidence in infractions based only on information that can be attributed to individuals who are willing to be identified. So it's like, yeah, we appreciate the confidential sources, but we need to know who is providing this information. And if you can't tell us who is providing this information, then that information is not admissible in this. So I wonder, is that a want or is that a rule for Michigan and the NCAA there? Because again, how do you remain confidential if you also then you can't use the information unless the whistleblowers come forward? So that's an interesting one to me. And I do wonder at what point the NCAA fires back, because they've done it throughout this investigation. When Michigan releases something, the NCAA releases, this is not just about cheeseburgers. And then Michigan fans are like, oh, I can't believe they would talk about this. Like, this is kind of what you're asking for a little bit.
Well, and what's interesting to me on this, and I have not dived through the bylaws of the NCAA's Committee on Infractions to figure out, is that true? That the NCAA can present evidence on an infractions based only on information that can be attributed to individuals who are willing to be identified. Maybe this is also a little bit like you're not arguing the facts, you're arguing like procedural stuff, which tells me you don't have the facts on your side. So, if whoever it was the initial leaker of this is willing to come out, well, then that just blows that, even if this is all exactly correct, they don't cite a source on that. They have quotation marks around that, but it's not clear where that actually comes from. Is that from like the NCAA's own rules, or is that from something else? It's not clear where that's from. I look at that and it's like, that feels like something that's not nearly as exculpatory as you think it is. It feels like that's like, well, technically, like that exact tone and that exact word. Well, technically you can't do this. And it's, okay, that doesn't mean you didn't do it. It just means, well, technically we might be able to get off on this technicality if you decide the same thing that we decide, which, will they? Maybe not. I thought it was interesting. Michigan is requesting a, quote, pre-hearing conference to discuss the origins of the tipster and their role in the charges against the school. And, let me back up for a second, because the quotations, I think I said, quote, it was in quotations in this piece. they're Dellenger is quoting from Michigan's piece. That doesn't mean that is in some other document. So I want to explain that and make sure it doesn't say this is in the NCAA's manual. It says, quote, information that can be attributed to individuals who are willing to be identified, close quote. That's in Michigan's response. That's not, that doesn't mean that's actually in the NCAA's rule. So I want to make sure that that's a clear thing. The fact that Michigan is requesting a pre-hearing conference to discuss the origin of the tipster and the role in the charges against the school. Again, the origin of the tipster. So who is it? Well, maybe they'll get to find out. Maybe they don't. Their role in the charges against the school. What difference does it make? At this point, you're arguing the facts. What did they do? What can they prove? And so the tipster, like if you're trying to make the argument about the tipster, that tells me you don't like the facts and you don't think you're going to be able to win on the facts. And, this is one of these things where when you've followed cases like this before, you can kind of sniff out we're putting on a brave face. And, I'm sure, I haven't looked, but I'm sure this is going over like gangbusters in the same segments of the Michigan media that were telling you all about Ryan Day's brother 6 months ago, where, well, look, they say this and this is all obviously true. And, when the other side says it's, well, that's just what they say. You have to kind of look at all of this stuff with a little bit of a jaundiced eye, but and that's true when the NCAA puts stuff out as well. But again, who gets to decide what the facts are and what the punishment is? It's not Michigan. And that's, I think, a really relevant thing for people who are going to look at this and go, oh, look, they're going to get off. Like, I don't know that they're going to get off.
No. And so moving on to another paragraph here, a little bit lower than that. In its response, the school acknowledges that some impermissible in-person scouting appears to have occurred, quote, though less than the NCAA claims, and that some recruiting violations occurred as well. All of the wrongdoing, it says, will be addressed in the Committee on Infractions hearing, and it will advise committee members of self-imposed penalties. The admission of the in-person scouting is the stuff that is basically, in my understanding, what I'm going to assume is correct, is the games that Stalions was at, or that Michigan staffers, lower level staffers were at. But that Michigan is claiming all of the stuff with friends and family, that's not scouting. That's just being charitable to your friends and family and giving them tickets. So that is something that that's why it's not all in-person scouting. And I don't doubt that there were some tickets that, okay, we don't need to go, or Connor himself thinking, I don't need to send anybody to this game. I'm just going to sell it on the resale market. And so, like, maybe not all of those tickets that were bought in order to scout in person were used to scout in person. But the vast majority, I think, almost anybody would agree not on the state border there of Michigan, that it was all for in-person scouting, or the vast majority anyway. And so the idea that, yeah, but like his friends and family, they don't even know about football. They're football dumb. So like, if they are, then why are you sending them for one case? Like, well, maybe they're just trying to learn about football, and just random games. All of these Michigan fans just going to, sure, I'll go watch Colorado State and Fresno State. Why not?
Listen. Hey, listen, you want to get in cheap to tickets? Maybe these are games that are cheap to get into. So that's very, very brave, very, very generous of Connor to fly his friends and family around the country to do this in-person scouting. Also very generous of Rick Reese for the super chat for our coverage throughout the playoffs and our coverage of the latest of Michigan's shenanigans. Thank you, Rick. We appreciate that. Appreciate all you guys being here with us. I had that one highlighted as well, that paragraph. I'll read it again. Other games were attended by Stalions' friends and family and do not violate NCAA bylaws. The school contends. Michigan also asserts that in many instances, the only evidence of the in-person scouting system is that, quote, Stalions purchased a game ticket, close quote. This is the legal doctrine known as, how stupid do you think I am? Like, what? Why would he do that? Why did he send people to games, always, not just random games? He didn't send anyone to, like, I mean, listen, Eastern Michigan, Ypsilanti is like 20 minutes away. Like, go watch. Chris Creighton has a great program. They've got that cool gray field. Like they do the whole cinder block thing. Like that's go to Ypsilanti, go watch Eastern Michigan play Northern Illinois. Why did you not do that? Why was it always games of upcoming Michigan opponents? It's the darndest thing, Tony. I can't figure out what the common thread is other than all of these teams were teams about to play Michigan, and the tickets were always on the low, middle, on the side facing the opponent's signalers. What an astounding coincidence that is. Like this is the stuff that you look at and you go, if this is the best, if this is the stuff that you're not only putting in the response to the NCAA, but also the stuff you're leaking, like, oh man, brace yourself. Here comes the legal A-bomb. Ready? Here you go. Maybe he was just being nice. Maybe they just wanted to go see a football game, Tony. Maybe. Do you like college football? Maybe other people do. You ever think about that? Like, all right, good. That seems like a winning legal strategy. I can't find any flaws. Can you?
They're about 5 minutes away from being like, actually, Connor bought those tickets to keep other schools from in-person scouting those games. Like he got those seats so that no other people could use those nefariously. And he only wishes he could have bought more than 2 tickets. Like if that was the one mistake he made, is that he couldn't buy more to eliminate everybody from in-person scouting illegally. And yes, very, 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 very innocent. The next paragraph after that one, Michigan also argues that many of the in-person scouting allegations, quote, do not support the 6 elements of a completed indirect scouting violation, including lack of witness statements or eyewitness evidence that videos were taken from the stands at many of the games in which Stallions purchased tickets. However, in the NCAA's notice of allegations, the association did attach some videos and photos of people near the seats Stallions purchased recording the sideline. Yeah, but besides that, like, sure.
Other than the evidence, there's no evidence.
Right. And did we say you need 6? I prefer 8. So yeah, like just because not all of the however many purchases have 6 elements of completed indirect scouting violation, I don't know that this is all about 52 game tickets being purchased. It's about however many that you did, and then but also the intent was to do that for all of those games. Just because you didn't need to doesn't mean that there was no scheme there. And I think Michigan is also relying on a lot on, but he didn't do it all the time. And really, he only went to 1 game, and a couple of staffers only went to 7 or 8. So, like, we're mostly like only 20% guilty, and that's 80% innocent. Which, if you round up, that's 100% innocent. Like, what are we even doing here? That's like 120% innocent if you add everything in together. You should be thanking us.
Yeah, you have to. It's like jazz, Tony. You have to look at the games he didn't illegally scout in person, or through his complicated network of. With or without these 6 elements of a complicated indirect scouting violation. And again, this is the most important word in this long first sentence is many. Ready? I'm going to read it again.
Yes.
Michigan also argues that many of the in-person scouting allegations, quote, do not support the 6 elements of a completed indirect scouting violation, close quote, including lack of witness statements or eyewitness evidence that videos were taken from the stands at many of the games. That one's less important, but it's still important. Many of the games in which Stallions purchased tickets. Many, not all, many. So when you say many, when you're saying many, you are tacitly saying, yeah, but some. Yeah, but some. Some of the in-person. Let's read it. Let's read it the other way. Michigan also argues that some of the in-person scouting allegations do support the 6 elements of a completed indirect scouting violation, including witness statements or eyewitness evidence that videos were taken from the stands at some of the games in which Stallions purchased tickets. You could read it the other way. If it's many don't, some do. That's a little bit of a tell.
Yeah. Some of these allegations are accurate. Next statement. Like it's not a great argument.
Yeah. And then the rest of the paragraph is, in the NCAA's notice of allegations, the association did attach some photos. That doesn't mean they attached all. but they attached some videos and photos of people near the seat Stalions purchased recording the sideline. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, like, the reason there probably aren't videos and photos of all of them is because they weren't aware. Like, the people that were finally caught on to this weren't aware that this was going on. So yeah, there's not going to be reason to shoot video or photo of people spying because you weren't necessarily aware that this was going on yet. So like the absence of proof for Michigan in this is like, it's not a great argument because it just means like people weren't on to you yet. It's like, yeah, like sure, but prove it. And it's like, again, that's what the NCAA has had to do, but they've proven so much of this. Like, why do they need to prove all of it when it all continues to fall in line with the attempts to have this scheme go forward? It's like, just because they didn't get photos or video of, say, 30 games doesn't mean that those games weren't being scouted, because the tickets were paid for and the people went. So you would assume the rest of that would have been followed through on as well. And also you had signs and signals and all of the placards from that opponent. So gosh, all of it would follow. Just because there's no video evidence or photo evidence is like, yeah, we only have 4 of the 6 known necessary things for in-person scouting. So, that's still, again, a pretty good assumption that there was in-person scouting going on.
Well, and the next paragraph was, I thought, very interesting. And it says, in one interesting bit, a handwritten note was found on Stalions' desk and was included as a reference to the plan for the Ohio State game in 2023 that states, among other things, quote, focusing on them all year, plus watching every TV copy, Skycam, period, close quote. The university contends that this supports that much of Stalions' sign stealing system came through legal avenues and not in-person scouting. Tony, I'm going to refer you to the precedent. I said it earlier, which is, how stupid do you think people are? Which is, if you could get all of this stuff from TV copy and Skycam, which, is there a Skycam angle for every game? Mm-hmm. Is there a Skycam angle for virtually any regular season game? I don't believe there is. Okay, so congratulations on putting 2 words on a piece of paper. So watching every TV copy, watch an Ohio State game, and you tell me how much they show the people signaling on the sideline. And if you've seen all 22, I've seen people say, well, they got it from the all 22. I edit a all 22 show with Ross Fulton every week. I do an all 22 show. I see all 22 multiple times every week, like copies of the Ohio State game. Guess what you don't see on the all 22? People sending in signals. Like, that's just, again, how stupid do you think people are? And believe me, I am aware of the year 2025, and it's not a terrible defense in theory, but it's not going to fool everyone. And the idea that you're going to, you just get it from TV, then why did you send people to 30 games or 50 games or whatever? Like, very obviously, this is not stuff you could get from that. You can watch TV and tell me how many signs you can steal from a game. Like, they don't, even if you're on the sideline facing the TV cameras, which at Ohio Stadium, Ohio State faces away, so you don't see them on the sidelines. Like, they might individually on 1 or 2 plays show the sideline. You might see someone sending in signals. How many times do you see? Go back and watch the national championship game against Notre Dame or the Cotton Bowl against Texas or whatever, and tell me how often you see signals coming in during the game. Or go back 2 years before this was known and tell me how often you see signals during the game. You don't. Like, this is very obviously nonsense. It's like, well, we found this Post-it note on his desk, and if the NCAA wants to answer this like Michigan, they can say, well, what's the chain of evidence? The chain of custody here, is this, are we sure this is really his writing? But, just self-evidently, like, obviously, yeah, I watched every TV copy in Skycam. Okay. This is, if you're going to argue anything, this is what he's telling the coaches. So therefore they, maybe they have this fig leaf of, well, maybe they didn't know he was doing anything illegal, except, we'll get to the later when there's multiple coaches on Michigan staff who talked about the fact that he was doing something illegal, and in one case yelled at him for doing something illegal.
Well, and here's the thing, the plus sign means in addition to. So when the handwritten note says focusing on them, Ohio State, focusing on Ohio State all year, plus watching every TV copy at Skycam, what does focusing on mean? Because to me, Tom, and I'm no lawyer, but if Connor Stalions is focusing on somebody, that means that that's where the scheme is aimed, and that scheme was buying tickets and sending people to games. So doing that, and then also watching every TV copy in Skycam, because why wouldn't you? You know, you're locked in on this, so you're going to take every bit of evidence that you can find. But this is not proof that the stuff came from. This is not an admission that the stuff came from the legal avenues and not in-person scouting, because what does focusing on them all year mean? Because it doesn't mean watching every TV copy in Skycam, because that's in addition to focusing on them all year. So these are two different things that he's said here, because again, the plus sign means in addition to.
That's boy, and normally I think of myself as the math guy. That's impressive. I didn't think about that, but you were exactly right on that. And yeah, it's not just watching every TV copy in Skycam. However, Tony, the conclusion that Michigan draws in the very next paragraph is, quote, an enormous amount of signal decoding was therefore permissibly done with TV and other publicly available footage, close quote, the response says. Tony,
is enormous all?
Well, an enormous amount is not all, in fact, but an enormous amount seems like an incredible leap from, well, there was a note on his desk that talked about watching TV copy in Skycam. So an enormous amount of signal decoding was therefore permissibly done with TV and other publicly available footage. Tony, I hate to keep citing the same case, but I will refer you to the United States versus how stupid do you think people are? Like, is this like, come on, this is like an intelligence test. Like I kind of want to pull up some Michigan sites now and go, I want to see who's taking this and going, look, it says it right there. An enormous amount, Tony, an enormous amount based on, there was a note on his desk. There was a plus sign. That doesn't mean anything. That's not, no, it's, he wrote the letters TV, therefore not guilty, Your Honor.
Tom, can I tell you that Alaska has an enormous amount of land, but compared to the entire United States, you know, there's also a lot of land left over. So that's great that an enormous amount of signal decoding came from TV. What about the rest of the landmass that we're talking about? There's, you know, there's still plenty to go there. Lots of longitude and lots of latitude there. So it's, you know, enormous amount is great. He did a lot of work, but what about the entire amount that we're talking about? And that's kind of just kind of passed by. What do you want to go ahead?
Well, I want to jump 2 paragraphs down, because based on the note, we have that an enormous amount of signal decoding was therefore permissibly done with TV and other publicly available footage. 2 paragraphs down, Michigan also claims that players and staff members only use Stalions signal boards on a limited basis and that did not provide a competitive impact. We read you the win-loss and point spread stats earlier. They use them on a limited basis. I assume that means didn't use them much on Tuesdays or Thursdays. Like, I mean,
1 day a week.
Tony, like not even 1 day, like 3 hours, 3.5 hours. And this is, you know, sometimes you're on the Fox game and it's 4 hours, but even that only 1/6 of 1 day. That's 1/42 of the week. Really, that's extremely limited. And so really, I think that needs to be taken into account. And, you know, did they, the idea that, you know, they were doing this in-person scouting and they were going to do them, you know, they were going to do this stuff only for the big games. And that was something that we had sort of, you were sort of led to believe, because they weren't in-person scouting Rutgers. They weren't in-person scouting, you know, Fresno State or Colorado State or whatever. But there's something in there where they talk about the fact that they got signals from other schools. They traded signals with other schools, which that's not you know, necessarily illegal. That's not something that I believe is considered a violation. But if you're doing that and you're trading stuff with other schools, then you're using the signal boards not just for the Ohio State game and the Penn State game and the, you know, whatever other major games. They traded signals with Rutgers, and they did that with I forget which game they said that was. There was some game that was not a particularly consequential game.
Colorado State.
Yeah. So you're using the boards for the Colorado State game, but like not not for most of them, like not the ones you're going to win, like also Colorado State somehow. They got plans from Rutgers and Nebraska staff members for the signals of Michigan State and UNLV. These were listed in documents as, quote, potential alliances. So, Rutgers and Nebraska shared the signals for Michigan State and UNLV. Do you think they were concerned about UNLV? Like, sure, Michigan State, yeah, it's an in-state rival. I get it. UNLV, you needed help to beat UNLV. Like, but if the point is, if you're willing to do that for UNLV, why would anyone give you the benefit of the doubt that you weren't doing it? You were only doing it on a limited basis, and you have to do it for UNLV, like not even good UNLV this year, like bad UNLV in the past. So, again, like it stretches credibility to suggest that it's probably, just used on a limited basis, did not provide a competitive impact.
So then we move forward. Michigan refutes the NCAA's assertion that it failed to monitor its football program in light of Stalions' scheme, especially after at least two members of the football program raised concerns about Stalions' process for deciphering opponents' signals, according to the NCAA. The information was not reported to compliance for further review and or willfully ignored so as to not learn about the potential violations. One of those members was then running backs coach Mike Hart, who told investigators he received a call in September of 2023 from a Rutgers staff member who told him that Michigan was stealing signals and going further than most do. Hart brought the attention to this call to then defensive coordinator Jesse Minter. The Rutgers staff member mentioned Stalions specifically. So now, sorry, you've got two Michigan coaches who are in the know or are aware of this or made aware of this. And it's interesting that Rutgers is again mentioned because that was also a potential alliance for Michigan. But then it's also Rutgers saying, hey, your guy that they were trading tapes with basically is like, listen, your guy's going a little bit off the wall here with what he's doing. So it makes sense that this comes from Rutgers because Rutgers was one of the programs dealing with them. And so he kind of like let them behind the curtain and you're like, ooh, like, we're from New Jersey and we think this is a little bit much. So when you're from New Jersey and you're like, I need to get the authorities involved, it's pretty bad. And so then, yeah, go ahead.
Folks from New Jersey's always historically very sensitive to electronic surveillance. Let's be honest there. And listen, Alliance, forget about it. Hey, come on, Tony. I Control F Gabagool did not find it. Very disappointed in that. But it goes on. The next paragraph is Michael Neiman, a low-level Michigan staff member, and is there really, Tony, any other kind, raised concerns about Stalions' sign-stealing system and refused to be a part of it when Stalions wanted him to rent a car to scout a football game at Georgia, a team Michigan could have eventually played in the playoff, but a team not on the program's schedule, making it permissible to scout them, according to UM's response. Okay, so that's one. Naiman approached assistant coach Chris Partridge to inform him that he did not want to be part of Stalions' scheme. Partridge went to Stalions directly and said he told him, quote, "You're not using this kid in your signal organization, stupid thing. So just have him be a manager." So now again, so this is like, again, if we want to do the fig leaf thing, technically this was not an illegal thing to do, but obviously there's, this is not exactly a big mystery that he's doing this. And so then it's, if you're going illegally to scout Georgia, wow, you've got all this stuff from Ohio State and you're just doing it from the TV copy. That's amazing. Their games must be televised with so many more camera angles than the Georgia games. Is that possible? Do you think a Michigan staffer has ever turned on an Ohio State game and thought, that's strange. I don't see as many signals as I was expecting, but I'm sure it's fine. There's a certain amount of this where, okay, you've got Mike Hart now being told directly, and you've got Jesse Minter being told directly by Mike Hart. And then you also have, there's a certain point where you have to kind of go, okay, so if you don't want to know, you don't know because you don't want to know, you don't want to look at, that's the point where it is, it's pretty clear what's going on here. And unless you want to really look the other way, and, this is all again getting into technicalities. Well, technically, this was a permissible thing. So technically, Partridge didn't know anything about the sign stealing thing being illegal. Here's the part that's not said here. Mike Hart told NCAA investigators. He's named here. Chris Partridge told NCAA investigators. He's named here. Do you know what those guys have in common, Tony?
They no longer work at Michigan?
They no longer work at Michigan. Jesse Minter no longer works at Michigan, but Jesse Minter's in the NFL, and Jesse Minter's probably not coming back. So he is in the land of no extradition, so he doesn't care. But the two guys who are potentially future NCAA coaches, who are incentivized to be, forthright here, are the two guys who are not also currently tied to Michigan, so therefore who don't have, their current employment tied to this. Those are the two guys who are mentioned here. I just wanted to sort of just kind of say the quiet part out loud there, because there's a little bit of that sort of fills in some of the lines around that. Like, why was it only these two guys? Like, well, it doesn't say it was only these two guys. These are the two guys who are cited. Why are these the two guys who are cited? Well, they don't work there anymore.
Yeah, and the part of the and it was interesting. After last season, there was this question of what's going on with Mike Hart. Where is Mike Hart? Like, what? Because he kind of disappeared for a while from the program, and maybe this is why this sort of thing. But even with the Georgia scouting, Michigan puts this in their response, like they weren't on the schedule, so it was legal to do. That's like this portion of Connor Stalions' scheme is perfectly acceptable because they weren't on the schedule yet. So it wasn't a crime yet. So, you're not doing future crime, are you? Like, we're not pre-crime doing stuff here, are we? This is not Minority Report. Like, we're okay doing it because they weren't on the schedule. So it's like, again, we're walking in the realm of technicalities. And right now that's about all Michigan has in terms of their argument through a lot of this. And so then that takes us to Jim Harbaugh and the portion of this story and other former coaches, because it says, for instance, Michigan acknowledges that former assistants Partridge and Minter, and this is regarding recruiting, sent more than 100 combined texts to a recruit outside of the NCAA's contact period, but the school refutes the allegation that several former assistants held tryouts in the spring of 2023 with recruits. It's like, yes, we did this, but we didn't do that. No, we are not, again, repeat violators. These are just different violations again. Like, that is not repeat violating. That is just violating stuff again. Two totally different things. And then Harbaugh, of course, stonewalled and got really handed a heavy punishment for his steadfast refusal to be part of this investigation for so long. And it says here, the NCAA alleges that Harbaugh failed to cooperate between October 20th and January 24th, 2024, when he did not produce text and telephone records from his personal cell phone prior to his departure from the school. And if I recall on Twitter, his attorney saying like there would not have been enough time for them to like remove the stuff on the phone that would be like attorney-client privilege or had no bearing on this case and things like that. So like they felt like the NCAA didn't give them enough time. And of course, Harbaugh gets the essentially almost a lifetime ban. And now you have the rest of it. You got Sharon Moore taking over, and who knows what the future is going to be for him, what the present is going to be for him once this all happens and gets handed down. Tom, I had somebody ask me like, so when is this all going to happen? And I'm like, I don't know, a year, months after a year, like no idea.
Yeah, this is all going to continue to play out. And there's a website that we've used in previous versions of the show where we've shown you like, here's the calendar, here's where this process is, but there's not necessarily future dates on there. And the NCAA is going to put this out when the NCAA put this out. And this goes back to last fall when we kept getting questions like, when's the notice of allegations going to come out? Last spring and summer, when's the notice of allegations going to come out? And it's like, well, they could put it out in March, or they could put it out in April, or they could put it out in May, and it ended up coming out in like August. And then we knew, okay, Michigan has 90 days to respond. And so then, okay, that's going to come in the week before the Ohio State game. But then they filed for an extension. So then that extension got them to now. So this is not something where it's going to be, the NCAA must issue a judgment within 6 months or anything like that. We'll see. This is certainly something that Michigan feels like they're likely to continue fighting, tooth and nail every step of the way, and then, possibly trying to appeal or challenge in court or something like that when a final decision comes down. Real quick on Super Chat from JM says, did we ever figure out why Matt Weiss was fired? There's been lots of reports and rumors on that, but nothing that has come out, officially beyond what was sort of leaked, almost 2 years ago at this point. It feels like year and a half, something like that. Yeah. So nothing, nothing really truly new on that front, but we'll see whether there's anything new. At some point that will seemingly probably come out, but has not come out yet. I did like the Michigan also refutes 3 of the NCAA's 4 allegations that Stalions impeded the investigation, including that Stalions failed to preserve all pertinent information by 1, declining to produce his personal phone for imaging, which he either did or didn't. So that feels like that's pretty straightforward. They're challenging that one. They are challenging number 2, withholding and removing hard drives from his office, which again, that's probably a traceable thing on a computer. 3, putting relevant information into a backpack and instructing a staff member to take it to an unpaid student intern's house where he, brackets Stalions, could pick it up, which it would be interesting to know where they got that specific. That's a very specific chain of events. So where did they get that from? Did that come from Mike Hart? Did that come from Chris Partridge? Did that come from someone else inside the Michigan program? Or did that come from this anonymous tipster who started this whole thing? And then 4, instructing a student intern to delete potentially relevant information. The 4th allegation, the school says, is the only one substantiated. So that doesn't mean it didn't happen. It just means we view your ability to prove that Connor Stalions instructed a student intern to delete potentially relevant information. We believe that you have sufficient proof of that. It doesn't mean that the other stuff is not true. It just means that substantiated. That's Michigan saying you have met our burden of proof, and this is not Michigan's courtroom. So that's not particularly relevant unless they're going to try and use that again to appeal that. And, again, I would love to know where this came from, because if this came from, if this is someone going on the record and saying, pick a coach, pick a staffer, whatever, I'm not going to put a specific name on it, but, some coach says, he put relevant information into a backpack and instructed a staff member to take it to an unpaid student intern's house where Stalions could pick it up. If someone says that, that's probably something that happened. Unless you view someone as having, an axe to grind and they're just making stuff up, that feels like that's probably something where there's probably at least a little bit of smoke there, let's say. And, declining to produce his personal phone for imaging. Did he do you have the images of his phone or no? That feels like something that's very, 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 very provable or not. I don't understand how there's gray area on that one.
Well, I think there's probably gray area there because maybe it didn't happen in the time that the NCAA wanted. And so then when they received it, it was maybe, if they received it, it was not in time with what they demanded. Same with withholding and removing hard drives. That seems cut and dry. Either he did or he didn't. Now, I think the 4th one, instructing a student intern to delete potentially relevant information, the school admits that one probably because, in my opinion, the intern admitted to it, whereas the intern in allegation 3 did not maybe admit to it, or they couldn't. That guy's not talking to the NCAA, where this is secondhand information from one coach to the other that they put the relevant information into a backpack, because like you said, it is all very specific. So who would make this up? And yet maybe because Stalions is not going to admit to it and the intern is not going to admit to it, then boom, didn't happen. This is all hearsay, which is what they seem to be relying on in this one. And this super chat from Ryan Dawes. Is it too early to say the offseason has been a bit of an emotional roller coaster so far? Man, you know what? it is what it is. There's no off season. I don't know what people are talking about. There's just times when Ohio State and college football is going on and playing on the field, and there's time when it's just off the field. It's all one season. It's all like there is no off season. It is just different portions of the year, the season. And then to wrap up this paragraph, Tom, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, in addition to there not really being an off season anymore, I will remind you, Ohio State won the national championship literally 8 days ago. Like 8 days ago, right now, we were in Mercedes-Benz Stadium watching Ohio State win the national championship, and bringing you all of that coverage of that. And you're allowed to just keep the emotional level right up here. It's okay. You can just be happy, and stuff is not always going to be exactly perfect. And we did a whole show on Jim Knowles leaving for Penn State, and I'm sure. Jim Knowles did a fantastic job at Ohio State, but you're allowed to recognize, I'm still allowed to just be happy about the good things that happen to the team that I root for. Like you as a fan are absolutely allowed to do that. Just keep it right up there. It's, in this story feels like it's sort of probably been an emotional roller coaster for a lot of people, because that's sort of the nature of these things, where the NCAA puts out its notice of allegations. And, we didn't get a lot of it, but there was lots of reporting about what was going to be in there in the lead up, and stuff that was being uncovered. And, hey, they have, schools have found a video of these guys doing this stuff that's obviously illegal. And there's an extremely obvious paper trail, because he was stupid enough to pay people with Venmo, buy tickets in his own name and pay people with Venmo, and doing crimes in the dumbest way possible. So, you had that, and then it was well, Michigan says this, and then everyone's ready to jump off the roof, because it's oh no, they're going to get off with nothing. And then the next thing comes out, and no, Michigan's going to get the death penalty. It's no, that's probably not going to happen either. But that's been a little bit of an emotional swing, I think, for people over the last couple of years. But if you are 8 days removed from watching your team win a national championship, you should probably just be happy. That's okay. This does not happen all that often for any program, even a program like Ohio State that is kind of right at the top of the sport. It's a once a decade thing for Ohio State, and that's only been for the last 3 decades. So that's not, you should probably just enjoy it. Try to be happy and not get too stressed about every last little thing, is my professional advice to you.
And you're not even a doctor, but that's good. That's good emotional medical advice. Which takes us to this next super chat from Omar Austin. Schadenfreude level of 1 to 10. On a level of 1 to 10, your Schadenfreude level. We can ask the people in the chat. We just cover the teams. This is news. We're here to provide for you guys. I'd say right now, this being Michigan's response, and not being a great response. Maybe, who knows? Maybe technically it's fine, and that's exactly that's what they've got to go on. And the NCAA is going to be well, our hands are tied. Good response, but there's still a long way to go. And of course, we'll be through this with you guys the entire way. When stuff happens, we'll go live and we'll talk about it. We've got the color chart on the meter that Tom has.
I didn't think about that one today. Yeah, that would have been. I was just thinking we haven't done one of these shows since. When was the last time this came out? Did we even do a show when they delayed the thing back in November? We might not have done one of these shows since October or September or something like that. It's been quite a while.
Yeah, and again, thank you, Michigan, for allowing the season to end before you did this, because I'm telling you what, I would not want to be doing this at the Rose Bowl or the Cotton Bowl, the national championship game, trying to do all of this and knowing well, the people also want to talk about this one, so we can't really ignore it. So solid work by Michigan.
Yeah, I can't imagine that we're us sitting in the hotel room in Atlanta or something like that and trying to do this show. Why is the font keep changing? I'm going to guess that it's related to Kevin Noon being in the comments. Next one from Jeff Johnson. This is not even a super chat. I just thought this was sort of relevant. This is the most favorable looking stuff Michigan could leak. And this is something we talked about earlier. This is pretty self-evidently coming from the Michigan side based on what's getting leaked and the fact that the NCAA is not going to leak. We haven't leaked what we said about them, but we're going to leak what they said about us, because they say that we're bad at our jobs. This is pretty self-evidently coming from the Michigan side. So this is going to be the stuff that Michigan feels that can be spun in the most positive way. And to Jeff's point, like, we have cited the United States versus how stupid do you think people are, like, multiple times on this show. That's not a great sign. And like, well, technically, like, if you say technically with that exact tone in a court of law, which they're basically doing, strongly implied, that's not great. So, again, this is going to be a long stretched out sort of process. Do not expect a resolution to this in spring this year, summer this year. I think there's a pretty good chance that this goes beyond this upcoming football season before there's any kind of a like firm final resolution. And that's maybe you'll get an NCAA ruling before then, but I'm guessing Michigan will probably try to appeal in some way. And so then it'll stretch beyond this football season, even if there is a ruling. And Tony, there was one more I really wanted to get to, felt extremely relevant to our interests. L just says chili sounds good right now, which, strong agree. When is that not something that sounds good?
I completely agree. And chili sounds better day 2 and day 3 than day 1. Like, you got to let the flavors soak. Yes, chili sounds good. Even though it was a balmy, like 42 degrees in Ohio today, like it's not really hot food weather. At that point, you're talking, salads and whatnot, like July 4th, potato salad and things like watermelon, things like that. Like, it was nice out there today. One last thing with this article about the Chris Partridge thing, and then we can start to finish up. Michigan believes that the NCAA's allegation against Partridge, who it fired, is unsubstantiated. The association says he violated a bylaw by pressuring an athlete to protect the football coaching staff by providing false or misleading information when answering questions. Quote here is, Partridge was terminated by the institution for disregarding the institution's directive to not discuss the investigation with anyone, Michigan said. His failure to abide by the institution's directive does not constitute a violation of any NCAA bylaw. The thing here, though, is, Tom, they could both be correct here. Like, the NCAA saying that Chris Partridge pressured an athlete would fall right in line with Partridge talking to somebody about the investigation.
Right, exactly. Yeah. The NCAA says that you were fired for talking to me about not talking about what it's like to travel with Kevin. And, the Michigan says that you were fired for talking to me about Kevin. Both of these things can be true at the same time. That's not like he didn't, it's he was talking to someone. What was he talking to someone about? Doesn't matter. We just fired him for talking to someone. That's it. Like, okay. I see you, Kevin. I see you, Kevin, in their backstage area. We're just using you as an example. It's okay. He did just put his camera on specifically to tell me I'm number one, and then turn his camera right back off. This is the stuff. This is why when people ask me what it's like to talk to Kevin, I'm like, believe me, I would love to tell you, but the NCAA, oh boy, yeah, there's so much of this that's, well, technically, or, well, can they really prove it? Or like, how much benefit did they really get out of this? You can hear their voices raising like at half an octave at the end of, a number of these sentences, which is like, there's a lot of technicalities in here. And as we said at the top, and as Jeff just said in one of those comments, like, this is the positive spin. Like, this is the, best case scenario spin. And it is, if that's the best case scenario, like, that's not a great scenario. And I do want to punch this up because this is just relevant to the lore of this show. Kevin says, I just did a segment on 97.1 and the sponsor going into the segment with Burger King. I kid you not. So there you go. Kevin's favorite, they will let him hold the pickle or hold the lettuce. He will never hold the pickle.
No, Kevin loves his Burger King, wants everybody to know it. And we appreciate him for his candid admiration of the Whopper and also the Whopper Jr. So much of this argument for Michigan, and we'll wrap up here. It's like, some of this is like, well, we didn't even get to commit those crimes. Like things happened that kept us from doing that. So really, we didn't. Much of this is just completely blown out of proportion because, again, we didn't need to end up playing against those teams or scouting those teams, or again, once the like, I wonder. Chris Partridge tells like, hey, leave this kid alone, leave this intern alone. At that point, does it just go to friends and families? And this is when that portion of the scouting takes off, because it's like, hey, I need these guys here, fetching coffee and whatnot. And, that's speculation on my part. And that's, dangerous to do. But of course, Michigan putting out all the technicalities they can. You mentioned like the upturn in the like, really? And some of this is like Michigan's argument is like, oh, come on. What are we doing here? Come on, like, sure, some of this, but what about all of this? Like this, come on. Come on, you. Yeah.
There is a certain degree of what's a moida to all of this. It's not great. And again, this is just the portion of this, as the article said at the top, the first thing I mentioned in terms of figuring out where this was, where this came from, and also, in terms of how positive this is, in the 137-page document, a portion of which Yahoo Sports obtained. So this is the portion of the document that was provided. I will say with 99.999% certainty that it came from the Michigan side of things, and you can go ahead and round that up in your mind. This is the portion of it which was, the most defensible portion of it. Like this is going to be, I can spoil the surprise for you. This is going to, probably not all of these things are going to go over in a particularly compelling way in the NCAA's eyes, almost certainly. And what's going to happen is then this is going to be decried as a witch hunt, because Michigan said all of this stuff is not true, and that, they can't prove it. But the NCAA, they don't care. They just want to go out there and crack skulls and beat up on poor Michigan. And this is a witch hunt, and this is a travesty and an injustice. And, Michigan will appeal it, and, this will all get boiled down to some extra stretching or cheeseburgers or whatever the version of this is. Just, Tony, it's just, they just wanted to go and watch some football. Is that a crime? Is that a crime in, I can't remember Charlie Baker's America? Maybe it is, Tony. I don't know. I wouldn't want to live in that America, in Charlie Baker's America, if watching football is a crime. They're trying to do this, Tony, in the United States of America, and I won't stand for it. That's going to be it, basically. And
strong,
if you think I'm being hyperbolic, I will just remind you that these same people, 12 months ago, were telling you that Michigan should leave the Big Ten for the SEC because they were being treated unfairly. So please do not tell me, come on, you're not giving them enough credit. They can't possibly be that stupid. Let's wait and see.
Well, and through this whole thing, the argument has been, this is all nothing. This is all overblown. And now it's gotten to the point where Michigan has to fight it because the allegations are so big and damning. Well, possibly damning if they're confirmed. So like the allegations being what they are, Michigan can't just be like, yeah, go ahead, we'll take the penalty. It's like, no, you can't, because the penalties for these allegations would be pretty steep. So you're going to have to fight it and see where that goes. And then, of course, as you're saying, Tom, whatever the results are, if it's bad for Michigan, it's going to be, well, the prosecution, the NCAA is the prosecution, the judge, the jury, the executioner. So like what they had no choice, or they had no chance to win this one. But yeah, so what was thought to be nothing is so big that Michigan has to fight and is going to fight, and we will see how it goes from there. So I think unless you have something else to add, Tom, I think we can wrap up now. And we've spent some time on it. We've explored the room. We've taken the chats and the super chats. We do appreciate everybody stopping by. And of course, if you've not yet done so, hit that thumbs up on the on this video. And of course, we do also want to thank our sponsor, Grateful Griddle. Buckeye fans, Grateful Griddle is here to take your events to the next level. Whether it's a wedding, corporate event, or birthday party, their Columbus food truck catering serves up mouthwatering smash burgers, customizable menus, really good sandwiches, and unbeatable service. Head to gratefulgriddleoh.com and let them handle the flavor while you enjoy the fun. we do want to thank you all for stopping by. Find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We do still have some championship confetti. If you'd be interested in some getting some of that, you do have to be a member. $4.99 for your first month right now. Sign up and say hello to us there on the message board. And we do appreciate y'all stopping by, and we will talk to you guys later.